So CineQuest coverage is ongoing this week and will continue. I did see a movie last night called The Moonlight Warrior, a foreign language film from China, which I did enjoy. But obviously, this video is not about that. I wanted to take a break from the CineQuest coverage for a minute to talk about something I saw completely random, had no prior knowledge. But before I get into that, I want to ask a question. What do you get when you combine two 80s classics and then instead of releasing the movie in the 80s, you release it in the 90s? You don't know? Well, I'll tell you. You get a movie called Nemesis. Let's unpack this movie. As I said, I knew nothing about this movie at all. I was randomly scrolling on the TV and saw something called Nemesis, and I thought, oh, let me see what this is. So I opened it just to see what the heck was going on. And I said, okay, I'll watch the first few minutes. And I started watching. And the first thing that I was struck with was how firmly in the 90s it feels, just from the opening shot, opening sequence. The hair, the costumes, etc. And the writing, just the dialogue is a little bit, it has that 90s cheese that's specific to the 90s. I mentioned that this movie essentially is like it's a mashup of a couple 80s classics. And I find it interesting that I didn't see this anywhere else. I'm sure someone else has talked about this, but I haven't seen it yet. But to me, this movie felt like a part The Terminator, part Blade Runner, with some seasoning of RoboCop, and you get this movie. It looked like it was just going to be cheesy throughout, like a cheesy 90s action movie, and it actually isn't. It's pretty solid. It's not okay. Look, if you compare it to RoboCop and Blade Runner and Terminator 1 or 2, it's not going to be as good. It just isn't. So just know that. But this movie does have a charm, and it ended up spawning a series of its own. It spawned like 4 other movies, plus like a spin-off or something like that. Now, my understanding is that the follow-up movies weren't as good, which is whatever. That's more often than not the case with series, as we know. What is it about? So it's about this guy, Alex Rain, who is a human, but he is becoming a cyborg. Parts of his body are cybernetic. He's a bounty hunter, assassin, working for the LAPD, and he becomes disillusioned at some point with the work. He's questioning whether or not he can continue to feel as a human. Obviously, this is a theme in RoboCop. When you look at Alex Murphy and what his situation is, it's at the root of Blade Runner. When you're looking at what a synthetic is or isn't, whether or not they're human, do they deserve to have a life because they're replicants? And to a lesser extent, it's a part of the Terminator series. When you consider how well rendered the T-800 and T-1000, or the T-101, T-1000, how well rendered they are in the ways that they pass as human. But here, it's something at the core of Alex's character. Is he human still because he has so much of his body cybernetic? And the plot is essentially Alex gets recruited to search for his former love, also a cyborg, and she's defected to enemy side. And so now Alex's job is to find her, convince her to stop what she's doing, and hopefully get what she stole back. She stole some stuff to sell to the enemy. And this is what we know. This is what Alex knows. But if you continue watching, you see that there's much more to what he's been told. So again, on the surface, it's a cyberpunk action movie that's in the future, set in the future, and it deals with at the core. This is right at the edge, just before sort of this. There's an impending battle between humans and cyborgs, and the cyborgs are they're winning, and the war hasn't really started yet. But this is what's going on. Like cyborgs are they're trying to take over, and it comes from wanting to be seen as valid as humans. They're superior to humans. They're stronger than humans. They want to be the dominant situation on Earth. So the way you do that is you kill all the humans, and that's what they're doing. Alex is caught in the middle. He starts out fighting for one side in the beginning, but then his allegiances shift, and he starts to see, oh, something's going on that I don't know that I agree with. One thing I thought was really unique about this movie is how straightforward the story is told. And then with that, the passage of time and how it's depicted. So the story takes place over the course of like a year, maybe 2 years total. And our character, our hero, has different looks that reflect the passage of time and stuff, which I thought was really cool because most movies wouldn't do that. They would rarely have somebody have facial hair or something that over a certain amount of time. They just wouldn't think about that continuity around like timing. If it's been 6 months, it's been a year, 2 years, whatever it is, you consider how different the person might look. And so I appreciate how they showed Alex with like a different haircut or like longer hair in a certain period of time or different, like it shows us where he is at a certain point in time that we find him after 6 months, after a whole year, after another, whatever, 6 months after that. Like just a small thing that I think really adds to the richness of the story, which is not something that I expected from this movie. It's not anything that means anything, but it meant something to me. I noticed that, and I thought that was pretty cool. The other thing is just from a world building perspective. Again, I mentioned that there's sort of a war brewing between humans and cyborgs that hasn't really broken out yet. But you get a sense that the cyborgs there's enough of them out there that they're causing problems or annoying humans. There's a really cool little sequence, really very small, that you could argue that doesn't need to be there. But I think it works again, for the world building aspect, that it shows the effect that cyborgs are having on humans just in the everyday life. There's a old woman, we presume she's going shopping. Maybe she's going to the grocery store, she's going to the market somewhere, and she's approached by a cyborg who's looking for our hero. The old lady obviously doesn't know. And the cyborg just, tosses her aside or whatever. And the woman fights back. And it's a little scene that you get the sense that she's been around long enough. She remembered what life was like before the cyborgs. And now she's not afraid of a cyborg. And she shows that. I think it really gives us a sense of how the effect of cyborgs ranges from minor annoyance to potential life or death threat, which is what Alex is fighting for. And Alex ends up becoming aligned with a group called the Hammerheads, who are the last remnants of humans fighting against cyborgs. The other thing worthy of note, I think, is I mentioned the writing, how there's cheesiness in this movie, and that's true. Having said that, though, there are elements, there's little blips, moments where the writing is elevated above the cheese. It's not a lot. There's not a lot of spaces, probably maybe 2 or 3 pockets where there's talk about just like what it means to be human, or talk about information age, or whatever it is, and how the movie oddly predicted how widespread information would be, and how it's we're overwhelmed by how much information there is out there on the internet, on our TV screens, on our cell phones, on our tablets. And in a weird way, again, it's heavy-handed how the movie addresses this stuff. But the fact that it mentions it, there is some craftsmanship to how it's brought in. It's worth noting. So yes, it's cheesy writing, but it's not all cheesy writing. And I think that counts for something. While we're there, something else that counts for something is the action in this movie. This wouldn't be a proper, I think, discussion about this movie if we're not talking about the action. It's a big piece of this movie, and the action is pretty good, actually. There's really cool practical effects with the gunfights. It's intense, and the sound design is actually really cool too. It's very visceral. The gunshots, everything is like, if you have a really serious system when you're watching this stuff, you're gonna feel everything. You're gonna feel those shots. You're gonna feel the punches. It's not a joke. The action is very strong and straightforward. It's pretty straightforward. It's not a ton of flashy stuff going on. There's a little bit of flashy stuff going on because my understanding is, you could tell the main guy, what's his name, Olivier Grunner. He is very lean, very cut. He's like the French Jean-Claude Van Damme. Is Jean-Claude Van Damme French? I don't know if he's French. He might be, but I don't think he is for some reason. But the point I'm making is that Olivier Grunner, he was a kickboxing champion. And so the movie has moments where they showcase that. Thankfully, it doesn't feel like the movie is an excuse for him to show off his kickboxing skills and stuff. But there are a couple scenes where he gets to do that, and it looks good. The other thing I thought was really cool that was surprised me about this movie were how many recognizable faces I found in this movie. You got a nice young, fresh-faced Thomas Jane. You have Jackie Earle Healy, who I didn't recognize was in this movie. Of course, you got Shang Tsung himself from the original Mortal Kombat, Cary Hiroyuki Tagama. That I was like, what? I was surprised. And then Tim Thomerson, who I only know him because I recently saw him in a movie called Trancers that I still need to finish. I started watching this movie again, another movie I started watching randomly. I just saw the name and I was like, oh, what's that? Trancers. So look out for that review. That's coming at some point. But Tim Thomerson, in this movie, he is an antagonist, and he's really good. He's very good. Yeah, so the acting was serviceable, I think, with the exception of Tim Thomerson. He might be, I think, he was probably the strongest actor in this movie. Oh, Thomas Jane was actually really good too. He's not around very long, but he was pretty good. All in all, Nemesis was a fun movie, and it's endlessly rewatchable. It's got good action, decent acting for the most part, and the story is unique. I really appreciated that. How the story has suggestions of a backstory and mentions of it. And I like that we don't see flashbacks. There's enough there. It actually the story still feels rich enough. And lastly, it also has the most 90s character name, Max Impact. That's the most... It made me laugh. There's a young lady, the lady in this movie who ends up working with Alex, and her name is Max Impact. It's like Danger Girl or like I can't think of another, but it's like it's pretty 90s. Come on. So if you're looking for something fun and not too serious, not too heavy, unique, and reminds you of something like Terminator or Blade Runner, and with a little dash of RoboCop, it reminded me of all those things. It may not do that for you, but I just thought those things came up for me in my thinking about this movie. Check out Nemesis, because I think it's worth a look. Like, it's not going to be your favorite sci-fi, cyberpunk type of movie. Again, there are plenty of movies that you in the same genre that might be better or that you might prefer over this one. But I think it's worth a look because it does have some cool stuff to check out. So that's going to be it for this review. Thank you for hanging out and watching this video. Stay tuned. Got more reviews coming up. CineQuest is going to be finishing up this week, and we got some more non-CineQuest reviews on the way. So take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video.